Hello, guys. David Vose here. Well, I would say it's a beautiful day, but I ain't gonna go that far. Not today. I mean, it's a beautiful life, and you're all still beautiful, and the Lord is beautiful, and my puppies are beautiful, and everything's beautiful. But today, I can't go that far because I'm stuck in the road. We had so much snow, and it's muddy, and I gotta wait for the snow to melt. And one of these things where you have these series of events. So I have to leave my truck down the road, and I walk home through the mud. And I'm like, I get home and I realize, okay, I didn't bring a lighter, any tools, and I left the propane tank in the truck, and now I had to do some finagling, and so I could get my morning coffee this morning. But I ain't complaining. I am happy. I really am. I'm very happy because these days come very far and few between. And the neat thing about it is that the Lord always makes certain that when I'm upbeat and happy and I don't let things bother me, and I just pray and seek for His salvation every moment of every day, that it seems to just fall into place completely. I always find that even the worst of events turns out to be for my good, and I'm glad because of the beautiful benefits it brought me, because all things work for good for those who love the Lord. But today, friends, I want to talk to you guys about, maybe we'll call this the rapture. We're going to talk about the rapture. I don't know if that's really what, there's so many other things we could talk about. The tribulation, whether there is a rapture. I mean, I guess that's what we're going to talk about, is because Christianity has this term rapture. It's a little bit like reincarnation. Some people say, I don't believe in reincarnation, I believe in resurrection. But reincarnation technically means to reincarnate a body. From your spirit goes into the body. So it's more simple to understand what that word means, to reincarnate. Probably because it was a word that we made up in modern times to actually explain something that they believed, literally. But this other word, resurrection, was given to us by trying to literally translate a specific word and not at the same time interpreting the rest of the verse. Because resurrection just means to rise up, to stand up. You could say that when somebody is reincarnated, they are standing up again. It's a kind of a bit of a picture in one sense, because if you're understanding, this is how the Bible works. It's hard for people to get this. But, so the word to resurrect, honestly, I don't know that I've looked that word up to see the etymology of it, but it's translating a word in the Bible that is to stand up or to rise up. Now, think about that. One could say, it means rise up, so therefore maybe it's just the spirit. A resurrection means the spirit rises up. You've got even verses in the Bible that might even indicate, now you're back into this other argument, whether or not we're going to have a physical body forever, or we go to some other ethereal realm. But the real deeper meaning of it in many places is to stand up. Upon thy feet, basically, is the connotation. In other words, raising up this physical out of the grave. Now, people like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff will say, see, there you go. It has nothing to do with reincarnation. You don't re-inhabit or reincarnate, because first of all, they don't believe you have a spirit. I mean, they think it's just electrical current, and it just dissipates into the air. But the body, of course, can come back. Well, that's already dissipated into the ground, into the elemental earth. So what do you got left? Because they think the soul is just your personality or whatever. That, like even a computer chip, if the chip that holds the memories is destroyed, you've lost it. So they've got nothing, because they don't understand that there is reality, which is the spirit. It cannot die. and the mortal, the physical, the temporary. So, if the Bible is literally saying, if we can say that it says we are standing up the body, raising up the body, then we know that it must be that we have an immortal soul. The witnesses don't want to admit that. And Jews and Adventists and people who are very materialistic, they think that I can't even imagine thinking that you just don't exist anymore. I know there are probably a lot of Talmudic Jews that believe that, and there are other, like the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection or something. There's a lot of Jews that don't, and it's come down in the Advent movement. But if we believe then we have an immortal being, what do we need this body for, right? Because that's our home. You live in the home. You're not the home. You can change and decorate the home. That's why the cosmos is called the order or the system or the decoration. It's all the physical laws and the universe flung all over the place is the physical. And really, we can't even comprehend that unless we use this one illustration. Close your eyes and image something. Imagine it. When you think, you're imaging. And those images are what are they? Well, they're a whole lot less real than the thinker. Let's put it that way. So if you're going to reanimate the body, that's reincarnation. But now if you say, no, it doesn't mean that. We don't believe in the physical at all, right? There's no body at all. We're just going to rise up spiritually, going to rise up. But, of course, the witnesses don't believe in the spirit, so they can't rise up. See what I mean? Who cares if Ecclesiastes says, who knoweth the spirit of man that rises, that ascends, right? Or whether the spirit of beast ascends, or whether the spirit of, who knoweth whether the spirit of the beast descendeth, but the spirit of man ascendeth. Like, what? Okay. Really, all these verses could be analyzed. And clearly we could come to an understanding. But Daniel specifically says, you will stand up in your lot at the end of days. The angel tells Daniel, you will stand up. Again, that's the resurrection. To come back to the earth, to be on the earth, to be standing on Mount Zion. And if your body's already disintegrated, it's dead, and you're going to have a body, then you're going to have a different body. Because the body is remade every 7 years anyway, according to science. Right? You got a new heart twice in your lifetime. Your liver is, every couple of weeks you get a new liver, every month or two. I don't know, I think 3 months or something. But, all of your body and your cells are being recreated all the time. You are not the body. That's temporary. The body can die. It falls off like a cocoon. We still have a more subtle body underneath. Because as long as you are a spirit, you're thinking, you're imaging. And you're making, the only reason we have this very carnal, hard, physical body that we have in this life is because we're trapped here. Our spirit is trapped in this image through fear. This is the science and the Christian science that people like Adventists don't understand or have ever thought of. But I don't know why I got off on that. Maybe it's important that we understand that. But I'm showing you how people don't understand words, and therefore they're arguing about things they don't understand. They don't know what the word rapture means, or the twinkling of an eye, or caught up, or any of this stuff. They don't know what those words originally were supposed to mean. So we know what reincarnation means because it was made up in our day by people who were trying to explain what they believed was an incarnation, another incarnation into a new body. When a baby's born, they incarnate it. And they were trying to explain that. So they used the right word that you would know what it meant. But in the Old Testament, it was a parable about taking the body and rising up the body. And these were people who didn't know anything about science. They didn't know how bodies were made. They didn't say, oh yeah, the only way a body can be made is to be born from your mother's womb. But when you're born, you're literally incarnating into a new body. Now, how do we know that that's what it means? But the funny thing about this is people like Jehovah's Witnesses are just so blind. They're just following this one little line of thought. They don't realize it's all over, explained in depth in the New Testament, especially, even in the Old Testament, though. But Paul says, if there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual one. And they're like, oh yeah, well, that's in the resurrection. It's going to be recreated. A spiritual body, better. And in that case, we won't even use the word invisible body, which is what they think spirit means, an invisible wind or power. So some electrical body, maybe is what they think. No, they don't. They don't even try to explain what that spiritual body is. But it's something only the 144,000 are going to have. None of us have it now. Wait a minute, don't we all have spirits? Oh, yeah, but that's not the spiritual body. Well, if they understood at all that spirit and mind is the same type of thing here, I wouldn't describe spirit as only mind. It's being, right? But the being that you really are, the immortal being, is what is thinking. It is kind of what we think of as mind. But there are, variables, different words you could use to describe the whole part of the, because not just mind, it's probably the will more specifically. But so they're like, well, we're going to have a will body, right? A mind body. We're going to live in a mind body. No more physical body. But see, they don't believe that. They believe that the physical body, that the great multitude, there's going to be this paradise restored. Now, why am I talking so much about Jehovah's Witnesses and Adventists? Well, they've kind of convinced a whole lot of people this kind of stuff. And it's kind of, I think, in people's minds now, because everybody's handing out watchtowers and they're looking at the pictures. Somebody's scratching their way out of the grave, clawing their way out of this tomb. But if you were to really examine what Paul is saying in just that one verse, we're not going to go through all the other ones where he talks about different things that fit this same scenario. But if you really look there, he says that the Lord gives it a body as it pleases him. One flesh of fish, flesh of birds, flesh of men. And then he talks about in the resurrection, we'll have other bodies with different glories, like the glories of the stars that differ in star and glory. An eternal progression of bodies. And if you look at Paul's experience when he went through the initiation 3 years, and at the end of those 3 years, he says he was caught up. That's the same word that people translate rapture. The Apostle Paul was raptured. He says, I was caught up to third heaven. But what was it? Well, he didn't know either, guys. He says, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot say. But I knew a man that was caught up to the third heaven. And then he says, the second time, I know a man that was caught up to paradise. Now, that place was not in the body, right? Not in this physical body. But yet Paul existed, and it was paradise. What is paradise? It's a garden. There's trees, there's mountains, there's rivers. You can't get out of the universe and out of the world, but you can leave this carnal body behind because it is a temporary body. And this is temporary because it's a place where it's a classroom and it's leading us to Christ. But the fact that there is a spiritual and a physical, as we were in Adam, we shall be in Christ. But it says we were all in Christ from the founding of the world. And the only way to understand this is to know that we already are in Christ and always have been because we're immortal. The Word that made all things that came into the world that were made, it was made by the Word. The light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world, which is the light that is within you, your mind, your being, your immortality, that you always had before the founding of the world. Well, then why are we not having it now? Because we've fallen into this lower, we've been lured, lusted, we've been sucked sucked in, deceived into fear. And this is creating monsters. And there's a great monster coming out of the bottomless pit. And what is the bottomless pit? Your subconscious. But you see, I don't know whether we could spend the rest of the video to try and explain all of this. And I'm not really here to talk about the resurrection. Let me just conclude that point is really just a reincarnation. And you can have a reincarnation into a physical body where it dies again. You're raised up to judgment. There's karma. You pay for what you do. Or you can have the other kind of a resurrection, which is the raising up into the spiritual body of Christ. And this is something we're all going to get. We all get one reward. There's only one reward, no matter who you are. All the billions and trillions of people that may ever live or have ever lived will all get one thing, and that is life. And life is what it is. It's thinking and knowing and imaging and living in a home. And we all get eternal and immortality when we pass the class, because even the angels have got their white robes, if you've noticed. They have bright, shining light. How did they get light? Light doesn't come except through knowing. And knowing doesn't come, gnosis, except through learning by the things in which we suffer. So, let's talk about this word rapture. Does it mean... Remember we talked the other day about the twinkling of an eye. Caught up in the twinkling of an eye. And we said that the word twinkle of an eye really is the little twilight, or that little twinkle of the sun as a glimmer, we might say today. We might, we still say to twinkle. The sun of the light is twinkling, or it's, well, I think we use the word twinkle more of a star, right? There's a star twinkling. What does it mean to twinkle? Well, you see this little blue flashes. See? That little flash of light when the sun comes up over the horizon that every eye will see. That is what the twinkle in the eye. Now, it shouldn't be translated twinkle in your eye. It means your eye sees that twinkle. It's the twinkle for your eye. Maybe would be a better way to say it. The twinkle that your eye perceives. And I think one reason we get that confused and we don't understand what that means is because we're confusing it with another expression. Somebody has a twinkle in their eye. Well, the word twinkle is still the same thing. It's a flash of light. Well, we have an expression. It doesn't come from this expression. It doesn't actually come from the Bible, this expression that we have today, where we say he's got a twinkle in his eye. And so when we read this, it says, in a twinkle of an eye. I think people think that somehow it's a flash in your eye. But that wouldn't matter, because what does it mean, a flash in your eye? We're going to be translated or raptured in the flash in your eye. Well, that's just as ambiguous as saying, because it has nothing to do with any flash in your eye. That's not something that they would say, oh, that would be a good parable for explaining how quick something happens. It happens so fast. It's just like, oh, look at that little flash in your eye. I just saw a little twinkle. Well, people have a twinkle that stays there in their eye, pretty much. It doesn't come and go real fast. It's not talking about something quick. A twinkle in your eye means you got the spirit inside you. They can see it coming out your eyes, your wisdom or something. But this expression is totally different, and it's about the twinkle on the horizon of light that you see with your eye. It's translated wrong. And that is the moment then everything changes. And why does it change at that point? Because we're going to be changed in the twinkle. The change is that now we have light, whereas just a second ago we didn't see that light. We weren't certain. We'd never seen the sun before. It was dark out, and well, things were starting to get a little lighter. We'd seen that before with the moon, right? But we didn't know what was going to happen with that sun, that big old sun, right? And all of a sudden we see a little twinkle. And we're like, uh-oh, now it's certain. It's getting lighter, and that twinkle is coming from a big ball of light, and everybody's going to see it from the east all the way into the west. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. But understand, guys, how beautiful this is. What we're not getting here because we don't see the picture, because we weren't under that language. We didn't understand the whole context of this expression. But it's not that there will be as much light at noon as there would be at dawn. We're not talking about the depth of light. We're not going to say that things aren't going to get even brighter during the millennial or on into the future. All we're saying is something changes. A complete change. We were living in the kingdom of darkness, and there's an exact moment when now we're in the kingdom of light. And the only way you can to be certain that you're in the kingdom of light, I mean, a minute before sunrise, you might say, well, it's coming, but it isn't there yet. But as soon as you see the sun, the twinkle of that sun, every eye will see that. Everyone will know, and therefore will all be discerning. Will no longer be in the darkness. They'll be in the light. That's the change. It's a mental change. It's going to sweep the entire world, and everybody on the earth will know that the change has occurred. But it doesn't necessarily mean that our molecules will be, like changed, and we'll just fly off into some yonder heaven. And so, you got to understand that words can only be understood if you know what they meant. They had a whole different way of thinking. In English, we don't have words. We have letters that we memorize that mean words. We don't know the whole etymology of any of these words we're using. We just have to memorize it. Now, if 20 years goes by, we wouldn't be able to translate English. How would you be able to translate, man, that's sick? You would say, oh, that was a bad thing. But it turns out that in our language, it means that's cool, right? You couldn't translate our language because it means nothing except for what we say it means at that moment. But if you go back to the Greek, they had all these little words that are related, had to do with astrology, everything. The language has to do with astrology, guys. Yeah, everything you see in the sky, the 72 deities, has to do with the 10 numbers and the 12 houses. Because we're not talking about the decimal system. It was a science based on a wider, more amazing knowledge called astrology today. But it's more than that. It includes science and math and numerology and music. Music, that's what music is. Notes, vibrations, math. Because you say, well, that's just trying to make a melody. What's that? That's not science. Well, melody can be attained by just closing your eyes and knowing and having it. You have an ear for it, right? Everybody does. Sometimes people get so tense that they can't hear it or they can't speak it, but they have this inside, they know what music is. And we just know, right? Because that's perfect science is music. Because now you're just knowing. You're just it's what's coming from within you and you feel it and you know that's music. Science and math is when you are pretending you don't know it and you're trying to prove that this vibration is really a vibration and how wide the vibrational or energy wavelength is and all of this. Who cares, right? So music is the higher science because it's knowing. But math is the lower science, the physics, because it's based on reason or reasonings, doubts. You're trying to prove it, but you can never prove it when you're using reason or math. Ultimately, math does not explain the universe. It is only a method to try and understand, but it keeps going around and around. And pi, though it is amazing and can give us a pretty good idea of the area of a circumference, but we found through quantum physics and the theory of relativity that that's not exact. Newtonian physics is not exact. It doesn't explain infinity. It's only this around and around we go, the catch-22. You're always learning but never coming to an accurate knowledge of truth. So the higher science is just knowing, going right straight into the reality, into the mind, but into this place where we reason, where there's language. We bring forth through our word the images, and we just keep bringing forth monsters. But we need to follow the true light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world, which is Jesus Christ. And through his word, he spoke the true, perfect blueprint into existence. Music, you just know. right? You just know within yourself the truth. All these words, you got to put them together to try and see if you know what the truth is, right? But in that language, there was a whole bunch of words related to being on a pathway. But you don't understand, you're on a certain pathway to a certain place. We're going home, brother. And if you miss the mark, it's because you're Orion and you're rising on the horizon, Horus, and you got a bow and you're shooting the bullseye, Taurus. But if you don't know anything about astrology, you wouldn't know anything about what sin is in the Greek. Sin is not the same as the Old Testament, which was transgression of the law, right? If you don't know that there's two different types of sin, and the New Testament says that whatever one does without faith is a sin as a Christian. And we know what we ought to do, but we don't do it. That's the only thing sin is in our faith. But it means to miss the mark. So we're practicing, right? We got a bow and we're trying to hit the bull because we're hungry and we got to get the bull. Well, we miss. Oh, darn it. Well, let's just give up and die then, huh? Well, we're sinners. We probably just don't deserve to live. No, we get another arrow. We've seen Daddy do this, and he missed a few times until he got good at it and practiced. So we have to practice that we don't make the same mistake again. And the Bible talks about practicing our faith and having gnosis by the things in which we learn. So you see, if you don't understand, you Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses and modern Mormons and Protestants and Catholics, and you're just going on about what your pastor told you, they don't know anything. So now you've got a whole bunch of people out there talking about the rapture, twinkling of an eye, and they don't know anything about astrology, so they don't know what it means that we're going to be changed. And Paul tells us being raptured is going to the third heaven. Where's that? Whether in the body or they're out of the body, he didn't know. So in other words, to be raptured is to be out of the body. Perhaps. To be caught up to the third heaven. But where did Paul go? He was still on the earth after we had that experience. So if the rapture, we say, yeah, but he's using the word in a different sense. I mean, in that case, Paul was raptured or caught up to paradise, but we're not going to be caught up to paradise, Dave. Well, wait a minute. Didn't Jesus say when he was on the cross to the thief, today you shall be with me in paradise? Didn't the rapture already occur, brother? Well, unless Jesus lied, or if that word today don't mean today, I think that word does mean today. And Jesus said, truly, indeed, I tell you, today you will be raptured, my friend. So the rapture is to be caught up to meet them in the air. The prince of the power of the air is the spirit that is operating in the sons of disobedience. So he's a spirit. He's not in the actual physical air, but in the spirit realm. You might think that they would have thought air meant the airiness between you and the tree. You might think, well, it have to be, right? Because they know that earth is solid and rocks are solid and the clouds are misty and they're up there and between is air, right? They'd have to, that's the air. But you don't understand, they didn't ever speak of a realm that they did not know or conceive of. They only saw this realm. They didn't conceive of other realms. In this realm, there's the wind, which is the word they use for spirit. It means spirit. They didn't have air. They had wind or air, but it meant spirit. It was powerful. The source of the physical part beneath your feet. They didn't think that there was another word to explain the spiritual dimension, your mind, other than the air, which was up, airy, as the mind is above the carnal flesh. So everything they conceived of was here. It was now. Here and there, all around you. There was nothing other than this dimension. They didn't understand the word dimension. They had kingdoms. There were various kingdoms, his kingdom, your kingdom, and my kingdom, but we're all in this one dimension or this one existence. Somewhere within paradise. Nothing else exists but paradise. They didn't know that the universe went zillions of light years into outer darkness and into the depths of eternity. They weren't thinking of that. They only knew the creation, which had the clouds and the earth and the trees and the water. So where was this air part? Well, that was the invisible part. You couldn't see the wind. In fact, the word spirit is wind or air. So literally, they saw something in this world that they couldn't see, and they said that's the source of everything. Because when the wind blew by your face and blew your hair, it had power, but they couldn't see it. It was a very powerful thing, this invisible stuff. And so this invisible stuff is spirit. So we have to understand then, it isn't actually saying that you're going to be filled with the wind when it says you're going to be filled with spirit, even though the word is wind. You see, but it's a picture of something. It means something invisible. That's literally true. Wind is invisible. Powerful. That's literally true. The wind is powerful. But we don't think of the wind and the air as mind. They did. Because they didn't believe there was anything else in the universe but what they could perceive or understand, or how some way to explain it. How do you explain something you cannot see and you don't know where it is, and you've got no demonstration of its existence? The wind could demonstrate its existence, and it was powerful, and it could blow down trees and uproot houses and stuff. It was more powerful than the material. They saw fire come down from the sky. They knew that something up there was powerful. So when they were talking about the air, they were talking about higher, the height, which is in their mind and the way they understood, it was above the physical, which was the base. So if you put that together, caught up to the air, you understand that they're being raptured, not into the sky, my friends, but your mind was being raised up. That's why they were in the upper room, the 120. And the foundations of the house shook, because the physical order, the lower carnal order, will be shaken. So now you understand why you see cities coming down from the sky. Somewhere in this invisible area, the power, the source was. And that the physical part would be shaken and removed. But that we would still have a physical part, but it would be that which was purposed. The righteous new earth will be a new heavens and a new earth. But it didn't mean that the globe would be destroyed. It didn't mean that paradise that Elohim made on day one in Genesis chapter 1 would be like, well, I guess it wasn't good, we're going to do away with it. Just as it was in the days of Noah, there was a heavens and an earth that then was, but we are waiting for a new. But we're still on the same globe. So too, the world that is now is reserved for fire. So it's a cleansing. Water cleanses the outside and fire cleanses the inside, but it doesn't mean that the actual paradise will go away. Only what Yahweh made. Yahweh made lies and deception. You see, Yahweh actually didn't make anything. He didn't create. He formed. In other words, he deformed. From the true living form, he deformed. He deranged. He deranged. He defiled. He corrupted with this vengeance, with jealousy, because that's his name. And he did it by separating and cursing. So what our Heavenly Father created, what Jesus spoke with his word, was then cursed. The serpent was cursed to slither on his belly. That's the form that he cursed it into. So we've got the brute and the carnivore and the bugs and the scorpions and the pit and hell, all made by the devil. That's all going to go. That's the world we live in here. The pain, the suffering, the insanity, the sin, the deception, The evil. It's going away. And when you have that vengeance, you use his power, the garden he made, which is the society we live in, and the laws and the appearances that we deceptively believe that we're looking at. We don't see the beauty around us, the beautiful birds and the flowers. We don't see any of that. That's the creation. We see things have been deformed. The Anunnaki now have 6 fingers and 6 toes. We're living in a 3-dimensional world, or 360-degree sphere around and around in the wheel of rebirth. And 6 times 6 is 36, and there's 360 degrees. And so it's a system of 6s. And what does 6 mean? Well, it's not 7. 7 goes on to rest, to perfection. You're not perfect yet. You haven't found the end of the cycle, the rest. So man, his number is 6. We were made on the 6th day. And all the animals were made on the 6th day. And they're brute and carnal. They're improving. You've got to get to the 7th day. And when you rest, you become free of the past. And you have the celebration of Sunday, or the resurrection. So the Apostle Paul didn't say, well, let's see. I was raptured. I went to paradise. But then the next day I'm back on earth and I'm talking to you about it. But that other rapture to paradise is going to be permanent. We're not coming back into a body. Well, he didn't say that. He said you're going to get white robes, immortal bodies, bodies of light. Well, you get your white robe at the end of graduation. See? So at the graduation, we're going to be raptured, caught up to paradise. And they're going to be having these white robes there. And they're going to put them on us. And we're going to go off into a chariot and fire into the sky and go to where? Pluto? No. We're going to still be right here on earth. But this earth, everything around you, will be transformed. Now, it may not happen instantly, like in your own eyes, you'll be looking at somebody and all of a sudden, you see this I don't know, his little molecules tingling and changing and he's, But it does happen in a twinkle at the moment that the light breaks over the horizon, because that's when every eye can see it. And once we all can see the love, we'll all be changed. But we will continue to progress eternally. The rapture is simply means to be taken or caught away. You can be caught away in your mind. People talk, the word rapture, literally fiction and nonfiction alike, uses the word rapture in modern English to mean a mental, like even having sex. You're raptured because you leave the body. It means to be taken out of the body. In many cases, to be no longer conscious of anything around you except this one thing, like this love for this woman that you're with. Oh, it's amazing. That's all I can think of. I'm raptured in her love. See, well, if that's the meaning of the word, and they were correct in translating it rapture, well, it's the word rapio. Right? So we're really just transliterating it. What is rapio? It means to remove suddenly, snatch away. Away from what? The lower. Does that mean you don't have a body no more? No, Paul was raptured and he had a body still. It just meant, at least for the moment, he was taken away, snatched out of it. We're going to meet them in the air. They're coming back with immortal white robes. And we're going to get our white robes and our crowns. But you understand, these are all symbols. The white robe is righteousness. And the crown is a gold, because gold is ore or light. And the little things around the top of the gold crown are little flames. And you get the flame lit on your forehead. And you say, oh, Dave, that's not in the Bible. Talking about chakras and 7 chakras. The Bible says there's 7 lamps burning with fire. And Jesus is in the midst, in the temple, in the most holy, in your body, lighting the lamps. Yeah. And it says that the incense ascends. It's the prayers of the saints. It tells you what it means right in the book of Revelation. Your prayer is in your mind. You rapture, you ascend, your thoughts ascend, and the Lord hears your thoughts. And then your body is instantly changed or becomes alive. We shall quicken that which is mortal by the renewing of the mind. It talks about the bodies being quickened. What does it really mean? It's not about taking old bones out of a grave and literally somehow recreating the body. And once we plug it back in, the person's still there. Because there was no immortal soul. If the body's gone, your spirit's gone. Jehovah's Witnesses would think. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses say, yeah. Well, the 144,000 will go to heaven. Well, where's heaven? Well, it's not on this earth. It's another realm. It's another dimension or something. Okay. So when Jesus died and sprinkled the blood upon your heart, he went his way to heaven through the veil, which is his flesh. Where did he go? The blood ran out. That physical body died, but he raised it up. And he said, touch me. A spirit doesn't have flesh and bones, as you see that I do. We had flesh and bones, and that's the only place in the Bible where that word is flesh and bone is used, that expression. Because everywhere else we're flesh and blood. And flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of deity. So nobody, I don't care if you're one of the great multitude or you're one of the 144,000. You're not going to reign over anyone other than have dominion as Adam did over the fish of the sea, over the animalistic nature within you. You're going to love one another. He who is greatest must be your servant. Nobody's ruling over nobody. You idiots. We're all going to just have the one reward, which is eternal life. Who's the servant? The dogs? Do they serve us or do we serve them? I get up every day and feed my dogs. I love them. I play with them. And they serve me too. Everything serves everything else, and we're subject one to another. But that doesn't mean that men aren't physically stronger. But it might mean that women are more emotional and they can feel more empathically. And maybe spiritually they're stronger in some cases. So I just wanted to talk about the rapture. I'm probably going to do 2 videos on this. Because this first video, I just want to talk about the words themselves. And that we're not really understanding any of these words. So how are we going to understand any of these scriptures? But there's some obvious verses in the Bible about this rapture. It's, now that we kind of know what it means anyway, we realize that it's something that's going to happen at the very end. Because if we were raptured before the tribulation was over, the whole world would be raptured. Because it says we shall all be changed. Right? All of us. Yes, the world is going to go through the wrath. We're not. So people say, well, that must mean that we're not on the earth any. There you go. Proof, Dave. Ha ha. We're not appointed unto the wrath. But what is that? We're going to be protected in the wilderness, it tells you. And you can find wildernesses on this world we live in. The wilderness isn't somewhere in heaven where we're raptured to. We may be caught away or snatched away in mind in an upper room somewhere in the wilderness. But it doesn't say we're raptured. Our physical bodies are caught away and snatched away. Because Paul says whether in the body or out of the body, I didn't know. It had nothing to do with the body. But some people will say, okay, well, there's, in chapters 1 through 3 of Revelation, you find the word church, ecclesia, 19 times. But then after chapter 3, like chapter 4, all the way to chapter 22, you don't ever hear about the word ecclesia again. So the church sees raptured. Proof. Ha ha! But that's like, you got this car, right? This brand new car, and you're like, well, I'm going to prove it's a car. Look at this owner's manual. The word car all over the manual. That proves it's a car. But the word car is in there because that manual is about a car. And so the word ecclesia is in the book of Revelation, chapters 1, 2, and 3, because those chapters are about the ecclesia, the 7 churches. And it's church, because it's all about the church. But after that, it's about the Great Tribulation of the whole world and all that we're going to go through. And it uses symbols. It's not specifically talking to a church. It's using symbols, and it's talking about the church as a woman, clothed with the sun, righteousness, and the moon beneath her feet. That's the church, the Christian church. And she goes into the wilderness, and she's protected. But you see, they think that applies to the old Jerusalem. The old Jerusalem's never going to be arrayed with the sun, or have a crown of 12 stars, or be exalted, because Yahweh doesn't offer the old system salvation or eternal life. Doesn't offer them crowns and white robes, but condemns them and curses them all. The Judaism and that old temple over there is going to be lying desolate until the consummation thereof. And that which is to go forth and poured out upon her will go forth, as it says, until her utter destruction, and not one stone will be left upon a stone. And then, wait a minute, at the end, in 22 verse 16, it says church again. Oh, well, that's because by that time it's all over and we come back. Well, you see, if you talk to Protestants, most of them don't know whether we come back or don't come back. This would be very difficult for them to understand what's going on, because they really don't know, and they admit that. Now, people like Adventists, they got to get this all down. And if you're an Adventist and you've read the Great Controversy and all of these books, and there's lots of them, you'll think, oh, look, they got this all pat down and their answers are all figured out. Well, they've got like 3/4 of all the scriptures put together that they alert you to. And it sounds like they know what they're talking about, although they don't know what the word rapture means. They don't know what the word resurrection means. They don't know what your spirit means, or the wind, or any. They don't know what any of these words mean, sin. But they got like picked out all these little verses, and they can explain these using another idea of what the word means and what the word really means. But they can explain it if it means what they say it means. But they completely ignore or don't even notice all these other places that were transformed from glory into glory. Well, they don't even use that scripture. Why? Wow, we don't know what that means. We just skip that one, Dave. Oh, okay. So there's so many other verses that they're skipping because their definitions aren't right. And so, no, that's not proof that the church is raptured off the earth somewhere in heaven above the clouds. You're like with rainbows and fairies running around and all the angels flapping their wings. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. That's a picture for your mind to understand esoteric truth. It doesn't mean that somewhere up there it's all actually happening, friends. If it's not up there, then we ain't going up there. Now, yes, I do believe that the other planets, that there may be other planets around each of the star systems. From what people say who have big telescopes, there does seems to be little wobbles, and we can kind of tell. I get the proof that they use. It seems to prove very conclusively to me that beyond our sun, there are other like suns, and they have planets that rotate around them. And if not, it's something else. But it doesn't really matter. I can think of it that way. I have a lot of evidence for that. I've actually seen it. I've gone out of my body and seen these things. I've been above the earth and I've looked down and I've seen other planets. The Lord has shown me. Oh, that's just your imagination, Dave. Well, lots of people. I was just talking to a guy this morning that was asking me my opinion about people who have had these out-of-body experiences or they've died and come back. He said he thought it was real. And I said, yeah, I've heard these people talk. In fact, I just saw one yesterday. And these people are experiencing something real. They're out of their body. They can do it even with drugs. You can leave your body. But when you're out of your body and you're still alive and your body's still functioning, then you're always snatched back to your body. There's a silver cord, they say. It's in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12. It talks about the silver cord. So you can't stay out of your body forever. You wake up and, eventually. You kind of go into a rapture, then you wake up. But if you die, then you have to be raised back up. You raise another body back up. You can have an immortal body back up, or you could go back to this old other body that can die and you can go through the judgment. There's two resurrections. This person I was talking to was talking about how it's a place of love and everybody's one with everybody and you're one with the universe and you don't want to come back. But he says that he went into this sphere with all these beings and they were all having this communion. He was just one with all. He knew everything and he was everywhere and they got mad and threw him out. Well, he didn't say it exactly like that, but in other words, it was almost like he said he wasn't welcome or he was thrown out. But that's not what was happening at all. The divine light wants everybody. The divine light is in everybody now. But we don't choose the light. We can't bear the light. We were all baptized in Moses and stood at the foot of the mountain of Sinai, and we said, oh, we can't bear the light, because we just couldn't forgive, because, oh, darn, we need justice. And we just couldn't love because, darn, I'm so angry at you. You see, we just couldn't share and clothe the naked and feed the hungry because that's my food and those are my things. Get off of my property. You see, we couldn't do it. We just didn't know how. We hadn't become fully perfected. We needed time. The Lord's not slow respecting his promise, but he's patient with you. He does not desire that any should perish, but all should attain unto righteousness. Friends, you've got to understand this more in depth with your higher spiritual eye. You must have eyes to see and ears to hear, or you will not get the sense of it. And you're not going to go with the saints in light until you can love the light and be in the light with the others and grasp the love and put away the vengeance. So, they also talk about the fact that going back to the Daniel 70th week, they say, well, see, that whole 70 weeks is determined upon thy people and thy temple. So it has nothing to do with Christians. And since some people believe, like I do, that at the half of the week, we have this long interlude until the last 3.5 years consummates, like the consummation or the end of all things in our day. And when those 3.5 years goes, there'll be 3.5 years where we'll be under the law again. And this is the wrath. And if we're on the earth anywhere in the world, we're under the wrath. But why would you think that? Why couldn't we still believe in Jesus? Because doesn't it say, measure the altar and those that worship therein? But as for the court, it's, going to be trampled on. This is symbolic talk. It doesn't mean that we can't be on the earth during that time. We still have grace. And yes, it is, for 3.5 years, the wrath means that somebody's back under the law. But see, that's the whole point. You don't get the mark of the beast, you're not under the law. Because the mark on your hand or your forehead is the sign, according to Yahweh, that even the Sabbath itself, keeping the Sabbath is a sign that you are obedient to Yahweh. Because he's the one who said, you'll not enter into my rest and you must bow down and worship me. Jesus didn't say keep the Sabbath. He was the Lord of the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath for us, not us for the Sabbath. We don't have to be a slave to the Sabbath. It's not a ritual. It's not something we have to do, keep some specific law. Who knows what day the seventh day was? It wasn't one 24-hour day. He made 6 days. He made the earth. This is a progression thing. It's not about literal days and literal times. So, the Jews are going to be on the earth, and because they reject Christ, they're going to go through this tribulation. But we're going to be protected because we're not under the law, we're not appointed under the wrath, and there is no condemnation in those who walk after Christ. But that does not say we're flying around in the sky somewhere above the clouds or on another planet. One day, yes, we may graduate to another glory, and every star differs in star and glory. We'll keep graduating and graduating. But all of that's in the future, and all these stars are so far out that it takes so long for the light of that star to get here. That's in the future. We haven't got there yet. And the only way to get to one of those places is not in a rocket filled with rocket fuel, but it's to go through your mother's womb, is to be born. And each of the planets that exist had to have gone through all the stages of Genesis chapter 1. Those places, those planets are just the earth in another time and another space. I'm the divine being in another time and another space. I'm experiencing this one little nook of the universe, but I am one with all. So those stars may be other planets, but they don't exist. Only this planet exists in this moment, in this time, in this space that we live in, that we occupy. So there is nowhere for us to go. We're raptured in our mind, and through our cleansing, we have power. And then there's a battle, and we do a battle with the false prophet. The false prophet says you got to worship and keep the law and be under the wrath. But during that time, there's two prophets that are preaching what? Grace. There's not an end to grace for the church. It's an end of grace for them because they took the next step and sacrificed a red heifer and decided to bring back, in their obstinance, they brought him out of the bottomless pit. But it's temporary and it's a monster and it doesn't really exist. It's all in their mind. And they're just simply choosing to walk away from the light. It says, no, why don't you, Moses, veil your face there? We can't look at that light. Just give us some books to tell us what you said. We'll have some priesthood and we'll ask him what to do. And hey, look at this gold. We'll throw it in the fire. Oh, look, it came out a golden calf. We'll worship that. See, they didn't know the truth because they're not ready. They're not ready to grasp the truth. The Lord is patient with them. He desires all to attain unto repentance. And he will. If that's what he desires, that's what he's going to get. So we can't use arguments like that to say, oh, we're not going to be on the earth. We don't have to get around verses that specifically say that after the tribulation, you will see the sign of the Son of Man coming, and then he will gather his saints. You don't have to, explain why it says that the cities will fall around us, but it won't come nigh unto us. He'll prepare a banquet for us in the wilderness. That the woman went into the wilderness. See, they keep mixing everything up. They say the woman is the church, but there's the Old Testament church, and there's the church of the Christian church. And so when it says the woman went into the wilderness, they think that was the Old Testament church. That's the Judeans. They're under the law. That was the Old Testament church. So the woman that goes into the wilderness is I guess they would say, well, Jerusalem is maybe captured and the people of Israel, the Jews, go into captivity. And that's the woman that goes into the wilderness. They say something like a half of Israel will die and the others go into exile or some guy of famine. I don't know how it works, but the ones that get away, they go into the wilderness. And for 3.5 years, the Lord protects them and they come back and Jesus comes on his white horse with his armies and they're all on white horses and they battle and everybody's around Jerusalem having the great last battle. And so we're coming down out of heaven on horses to have this battle. We're now immortal. And this woman is just this earthly, this Old Testament group called the Judeans. And maybe a remnant of some of the other tribes. They don't know. God knows. There'll be 12,000 from each tribe, right? And Israel is not Judean. It's really all of Israel. And that's the only Israel there is. And that's Israel. And we're not. We're the Gentiles. But what they don't understand is a main part that we go through all the time on this channel. That the Gentiles and the 10 tribes have become mixed as one. We went into the nations and were planted. Like leaven that leavens the whole lump. It's why Solomon married Bathsheba and Judah married Tamar, because the flesh and the spirit have got to be wed. The nations are remember the whole idea in the New Testament was that Peter didn't want to go to the nations, they were unclean. And the angel said, don't call unclean what Lord has cleansed. Yeah, they were unclean because, they didn't know the Lord. They were sinners. They were in the world. They were just carnal beings. It represents the carnal flesh. But the Lord's going to redeem that carnal flesh. They're not wicked because they are bad. They've been deceived. The Lord has come to give them light. And everybody's got that carnal self. The Judeans were only clean at one time because the Lord had a Sanhedrin. There was still a government there. But by the time Jesus came, he said, I've already rejected you too. So the house of the Judeans was left desolate and will continue to be desolate. But the Lord already has fulfilled what they don't understand and has redeemed his relationship and has made the new covenant with the many, with the all. And they went to the Gentiles in the days of Jesus, and they were clean. And the Gentiles are then considered the diaspora, or the 10 tribes that now come in and are all the world. It's Joseph went down in Egypt and came out a great multitude, right? The mixed multitude. Because Joseph married Asenath, a Canaanite. So the welding of the spirit and the flesh has already been done. Jesus already married the woman, and the woman is the one that was divorced by Yahweh, the flesh. So if you don't understand that there isn't one dispensation of the law and one dispensation of grace, and if these guys go sacrifice a red heifer, there's no more grace. No, that's their disobedience. There's no more grace for them, but we still got grace. So this is all false to say that the woman that went into the wilderness is not Christianity, because it always was Christianity. She's clothed with the sun. The moon's beneath her feet. So she's not under the old law. She's clothed with the sun. And she gives birth to a child that will rule all nations with a rod of iron. So you say, oh, that's Jerusalem, see? The Old Testament church gave birth to Jesus. No, they didn't. The Essenes were not part of Judaism. They went out into the wilderness. They were at Heliopolis. They were the pagans. And they're the ones who had the tower. And Mary, who was a priestess at the Magdala, Mary Magdala, that Jesus married. And Jesus was from Zerah, up in Syria, from Zarephath, or the house of Zerah. He was not of Perez. And they said, what? This man's from Galilee. Nothing good can come from the Galilee. Well, because they understood that they didn't like the Samaritans. They weren't the same religion. They were of the 10 tribes, Bethel. So because these churches don't understand any of this, they've come up with all these theories that are false. On the earth today, the last half of the week is when the Messiah has come and has made an end of sacrifices and sealed up the vision and anointed the most holy, which is Jesus and all of us. We've already been anointed. So now the last half, it's been done, all of this. The only problem is these unbelievers that want to bring him out of their imagination, their bottomless pit, and create this monster and rebel. They wouldn't receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. We're already saved. It doesn't matter if there's war, if all the mountains fall around us in the cities and thousands at our left hand and 10,000s at our right. It shall not come nigh unto us, because you see, we're in the Lord's kingdom. There's no wrath going to come on us. We don't have to go anywhere to get out of the wrath. The Lord is greater than that. So none of these are proofs that there is no post-tribulation rapture. In fact, as we're going to show you, there is no rapture at all. not in the way that you understand it. But anyway, guys, I see we're over an hour, and looks like that's a good spot to stop this today. I think we'll do another video on this subject, because I want to go through the verses where it talks about the rapture and show you line by line